Will China hit back at Trump's tariffs by pulling, as what one guest in the morning told us, the nuclear option? That is, selling US treasuries, US bonds basically.
The trade war hits American farmers, and President Trump won't rule out a recession.
The US-China trade war has been quite the roller coaster. Donald Trump slapped tariffs on China, Beijing fired back, Trump doubled down, 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, up to 245% on some items.
The US-China trade war has escalated beyond expectations, and we are now standing on the brink of something much bigger. The bombs are no longer made of steel or uranium. They're made of soybeans, corn, pork, and tomatoes. And the shock waves? They're being felt across the American heartland, in the very fields where crops are planted and lives are built. But what happens when these bombs explode? What happens when the world's largest economies go head-to-head over food? The fallout of this trade war is not just about tariffs, it's about survival. The survival of American agriculture itself. But with China ramping up its retaliation, the future of American farmers is now uncertain. The stakes have never been higher. Before we dive into the full scale of the crisis, let's take a step back. On April 30th, 2025, something happened that forever changed the trajectory of global trade. The United States announced the most significant tariffs on Chinese goods in over 50 years. These tariffs, ranging from 145% to 245%, were a slap in the face to China. But what many didn't expect was the retaliatory fire that would come next. China didn't just respond, it escalated, and suddenly American farmers, who rely heavily on exports, found themselves trapped in a geopolitical storm. China, Mexico, and even Europe began closing doors to American agricultural exports, and the damage has been catastrophic. So, how did we get here? And more importantly, what happens next for American farmers who are bearing the brunt of this global trade war? The tension between the United States and China has been building for years, but on April 30th, the situation took a turn for the worse. The US government decided to impose tariffs on Chinese imports to an unprecedented level. At first, the move was seen as a strategic attempt to level the playing field, but it quickly spiraled into an all-out trade war. China didn't back down. Instead, it retaliated with tariffs of its own on US goods. But the biggest casualties of this trade conflict? American farmers. China had been the biggest buyer of US agricultural products, spending over $4 billion on everything from beef to chicken, corn, soybeans, and pork. But suddenly, China stopped buying. And just like that, American farmers lost their most lucrative market. The immediate impact was staggering. As American farmers were planting their crops, they were operating in the dark, unsure if they would have a market to sell to. Farmers like Wes Schuma from Missouri were particularly hit hard. Schuma said, "We are still planting, but it is on a leap of faith. We have no idea if there will even be a foreign market to sell to." The uncertainty left many farmers questioning the future of their crops. The tariff war had already caused massive price fluctuations in the markets. Soybean futures plunged sharply, and companies like Tyson Foods, who relied on pork exports, were forced to suspend shipments. The ripple effects were felt throughout the economy. Thousands of jobs in the agricultural sector were at risk, and many farms were staring down the barrel of financial ruin. While the US and China were clashing over soybeans and pork, Mexico quietly entered the fray. On May 1st, the US Department of Commerce ended a suspension agreement that had prevented anti-dumping duties on Mexican tomatoes. This marked the beginning of what would soon be known as the Tomato War. Mexican tomatoes, which had flooded the US market for years, were now being hit with tariffs of 20.91%. Florida tomato growers were celebrating, believing that they would finally have a chance to reclaim their market share. Robert Gaither of the Florida Tomato Exchange declared it a major victory for American agriculture. But not everyone was happy. The Fresh Produce Association of the Americas warned that these tariffs would raise prices for consumers and lead to shortages in U.S. stores. Mexico, in response, warned that it could retaliate by blocking U.S. exports like corn and pork. This set the stage for a much larger global trade conflict that would affect American farmers from all directions. As if things weren't already bad enough for American farmers, China wasn't done. The country launched a full-scale assault on U.S. beef exports. In March, Chinese regulators allowed import permits for U.S. beef processing facilities to expire. The result? American beef exports to China collapsed. From over 2,000 tons per week earlier this year, U.S. beef exports dropped to just 54 tons. But that wasn't the end. China initiated an investigation into global beef suppliers, including the U.S., Brazil, Argentina, Australia, and Uruguay. The fear among U.S. exporters was palpable. If China imposes tariffs or quotas on foreign beef, the global beef market could collapse, leading to even lower prices for American farmers. While tensions were rising in North America and Asia, Europe was dealing with its own set of challenges. Poland, Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia were caught in the fallout from the European Union's decision to lift tariffs on Ukrainian agricultural products. The flood of cheap Ukrainian grain undercut local prices, pushing Eastern European farmers to take drastic measures. In the U.S., the conflict with Mexico continued to simmer. In February, Mexico passed a constitutional amendment banning the planting of genetically modified corn. This was a direct blow to U.S. farmers, as 80% of U.S. corn exports to Mexico are genetically modified. The potential for a full-scale ban on U.S. corn imports looms large, threatening to escalate the trade war even further. And in the background, the U.S. government was considering a new proposal to impose port fees on Chinese ships entering American harbors. While this might seem like a small measure, it could have devastating consequences for American rice exporters. The trade war has gone nuclear, the fallout is real, and it's impacting every farmer in America. The damage is not just temporary, it may be irreversible. As China and other countries decouple from the U.S., replacing American exports with goods from other countries, the question remains, how long before the damage becomes permanent? American farmers, who were once the backbone of the U.S. economy, are now caught in the crossfire of a global trade conflict that seems to have no end in sight. With markets disappearing, tariffs crippling exports, and foreign markets closing one by one, the future of American agriculture looks increasingly uncertain. The global economy is shifting, but if the U.S. can't find a way to negotiate a resolution to this trade war, American farmers could face a crisis like never before, and the entire world could feel the impact. Before we wrap up, don't forget to hit that like button to show your support for American farmers. Share this video, because the world needs to understand what's at stake. The global trade war is happening right now, and the future of our food supply depends on how it unfolds.